Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Literature Channel. I'm Tim Wilson. I'm a professor of English literature at the University of Ottawa. In today's video, we're going to undertake a close reading of Shakespeare's Sonnet number 12. So a few days ago, we did a close reading of Sonnet number 1, and a viewer recommended that we do Sonnet 12 next. I thought that was a good idea and had been planning to do it in any case. So here we are. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel. It helps others find this type of content. Also, leave a comment if you have other interpretive points to raise about the poem, or if you have recommendations of other works we could analyze. So let's get started. Reminder that Shakespeare's sonnets were published in 1609, and there were a vogue of sonnet sequences in the 1590s, all following on Sidney's Astrophil and Stella. And in Shakespeare's sonnet sequence, there's about 154 poems there. I have a number of other videos that can help you give context to the sonnets in general, so I'll leave those links in the description. There's an introduction to Renaissance literature, there's an introduction to Elizabethan sonnets. In general, there's an introduction to Shakespeare, an introduction to Shakespeare's sonnets, so the whole sequence, as well as I mentioned, we did a close reading of sonnet number 1 a few days ago. So Sonnet 12, like Sonnet 1, is within this section of the sonnets that are referred to as the Procreation sonnets. So 1 to 17, it's exploring this theme of time and how it leads to death and mortality for all things. The passing of time is the problem, and the question of how we make meaning of our lives. And this is an important theme in all literature, and Shakespeare's Procreation sonnets participate in that tradition of trying to think about meaning within human mortality. And the Procreation sonnets are the speaker trying to urge this young man that he should have children, and in that way would perpetuate in some way the young man's say being over time. Toward the end of the section, we'll note that there's limits to procreation as a solution, and ultimately poetry is seen as the way to seek kind of an eternalizing of the youth. So let's get right into it and read sonnet number 12. When I do count the clock that tells the time, and see the brave day sunk in hideous night, when I behold the violet past prime, and sable curls all silvered o'er with white, when lofty trees I see barren of leaves, which erst from heat did canopy the herd, and summer's green all girded up in sheaves, borne on the bier with white and bristly beard, then of thy beauty do I question make, that thou among the wastes of time must go, since sweets and beauties do themselves forsake, and die as fast as they see others grow. And nothing gainst time's side can make defense, save greed, to brave him when he takes thee hence. So, as I've mentioned in terms of these close readings of sonnets or other poems, it's good often to just get a general sense. Can we paraphrase what's the poet kind of saying in general terms, and we can do that to begin with. So the first quatrain is basically saying, when I'm counting the ticking of the clock and I'm watching the beautiful day sink into night, when I look at the faded violet and her petals turn to white, notice the petals are turning to white just like a human's hair grays. And when I see large trees without leaves, which before in the summer's heat gave shade to animals, and the summer's harvest gathered in sheaves and is carried on a funeral cart, looking like an old bristly beard, so looking like an old man. When I see these things, then I ask myself, what worth is your beauty if in the future it's going to die out? Since we know that sweets and beauty spoil over time, and will die out even when watching others grow. And I think that nothing can stop the ceaseless march of time except breeding, so except procreating, which defies the inevitability of death. So that would be a simple way, let us say, of paraphrasing the poem, but kind of missing the beautiful way in which Shakespeare expresses it. So looking at rhythm and meter, and look at again this video on the introduction to Elizabethan sonnets for a more in-depth description of rhythm and meter and how that works in poetry. But as in a lot of English poetry, this poem, especially in the beginning, is fairly regular iambic pentameter. So an iambic rhythm is an unstressed, then a stressed syllable. That's an iambic foot. And a pentameter means that there are five of these sets of unstressed and stressed syllables, five iambs. So generally 10 syllables, 5 feet, uh, from which we get pentameter, penta 5. So the sonnet begins, especially in the first 8 lines, with an overly regular rhythm of this iambic pattern. So we often say that poetry is in iambic pentameter, but most of the time, poetry doesn't follow that rhythm strictly. It's a natural rhythm to fall back to, let's say every few lines, but it's seldom that you're going to see that repetitively just because it has too much of a mechanical feel. In this sonnet, it seems to be purposefully the case to have that regular rhythm at the beginning to echo that ticking of the clock. And this effect is heightened by the alliterations in the first 8 lines. I've tried to highlight those. When I count the clock, tells the time. See the brave day sunk in hideous night. Violet past prime, and I won't go through all of them, but you can see them highlighted there. There's a mechanical beat to the rhythm as well as to the sounds from the alliterations. And if we look at rhyming and structure, we see the classic A B C D E F E F G G structure of a Shakespearean sonnet. So we have 3 quatrains. We have a poetic turn, so a change in tone or a change in focus in the poem beginning in the 3rd quatrain. So the then marks a turn. So the first 2 quatrains begin when I see this or when I think about this, and then the second one when I think about that. So there's a continuation of the type of thought, but then with the 3rd quatrain, there's a turn to when, then I think about these things. Uh, when I see this, then I think about that. So there's a turn in focus, and we have an ending with the rhyming couplet, which is typically English, and the actual overall structure is very Shakespearean, as opposed to, as I said in previous videos, this Petrarchan sonnet form that was the way in which sonnets were popularized in the 14th century by Petrarch, where we have an octave, first 8 lines, and a sestet, the last 6 lines. So let's look at diction, so word choice, imagery, themes. So if we look at the first quatrain, the clock. So when I count the clock, so how do we count a clock? So obviously the count the clock is he's counting the chiming of the clock or the or the what the clock is telling, so to speak. And this would be a metonymy, a use of the name of one thing for that of another, or an attribute for which that is with which that's associated. So the clock is associated with the chimes and with the time it tells. So it's metonymically substituted for the time that he's counting there. And then brave day. So brave in this context means immediately splendid and beautiful, but also brave in the sense of having courage, as opposed to hideous, which is derived from, we get that it's related to the word hide. So it's Old French word meaning dread. So it's fearful. So it provides an antithesis, brave day and hideous night. Um, Prime meaning peak. So when I see the violet pass their prime is their peak, and it also continues the time metaphor as prime is the first hour of the day. So usually daybreak or 6 a.m. or so. And sable curls. So sable here is literally black, but probably here dark brown hair that's turned to white or gray. When I see this happen, uh, dark hair turning to gray as people age, then I think of your aging. And note in this sonnet the many references to varied colors. So violet, sable, green, silver, white. So the change a lot a lot is being carried in this sonnet in sight in colors. When I see this, maybe the first line when I count the clock tells the time. Maybe there's a bit of hearing, but a lot is going on with sight in the sonnet. So the second quatrain, when lofty trees I see barren of leaves. So the leaves are bare, the trees are bare, the leaves are gone, but also barren in the sense of lacking the power of procreation, and which erst means shortly before, from heat did canopy the herd. So canopy is shelter, and this is the earliest use of canopy as a verb, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, which is usually right on these things. And born on the bier with white and bristly beard. So um, I think well, first of all, what I'll highlight is summer's green is a synecdoche for it's a part substituted for a whole to indicate the bounty of the crops, and girded up is tied up. In this last line, I really want to highlight this. I think a great metaphor: born on the bier with white and bristly beard. So he's talking about a harvest of wheat that's girded up or tied up, and the heads of this wheat turn white and bristly like a beard, and the crops they're transported on this cart, which is was like a funeral, like a cart that would transport dead bodies, and it's echoes metaphorically, let's say, the intertwining of the natural cycles that have been discussed along with human mortality. So it's a very powerful metaphor there. And then, since sweets and beauties do themselves forsake, so they lose their essential nature, um, and die as fast as they see others grow, and nothing against time's side. So so time and death, as most people probably know, are pictured in these medieval emblem books with a scythe representing the harvesting, the reaping of the grain, kind of as death reaps and time reaps all humans as well. And nothing against time side can make defense save breed. So physical reproduction. We'll come back to this word. It's a very interesting word to try to evoke the importance of having children. There's obviously more, let's say, noble ways of expressing that. To brave him, so to challenge death, challenge time, when he takes the hence. So temporality, the problem of mortality within the tradition is often evoked using this metaphor of dead leaves, as we have here in this sonnet as well. In Homer's Iliad, one of my favorite evocations of this image in Homer's Iliad, and this is in book 6, we have Glaucus's defiant words to Diomedes. He says, generations of men are like the leaves. In winter, winds blow them down to earth. But then, when spring season comes again, the budding wood grows more. And so with men, one generation grows, another dies away. So here, kind of like dead leaves, human life is fleeting, is ultimately without permanence, first of all. But who remembers 4 generations of leaves ago, and individual leaves that have long since dried up? How do they last? In the Iliad, there's an attempt by in the figure of Achilles to see something that transcends the mortality and the temporality of human existence in fame, in human fame. And I think ultimately in Homer that's found wanting. Here, the we already see in Homer the limits of procreation as a way to get beyond that. The leaves seem to perpetuate themselves. There's going to be another generation of leaves next year, but that doesn't give any more meaning or importance or endurance to the generation of leaves before. To some extent, it's just a, let's say, a symbol of their ultimate insignificance. I think another echo here is Ovid's Metamorphoses. So in book 15 of the Metamorphoses, we have Pythagoras, this Greek philosopher, is delivering a lengthy speech on the nature of change and explaining how the world is in a constant state of flux. And he says nothing's truly permanent. And he concludes that book with, and concludes, this is the end of the entire Metamorphoses, the entire epic, with a meditation on his own legacy, Ovid does, expressing his hope that his poetry will endure beyond his time. And he famously declares that as long as people read his work, he will live on through poetry in the minds of future generations. So, so to sum up, I think in Sonnet 12, we begin to see the limits of procreation, as we did in the tradition, as we see in Homer and Ovid, as a solution to the problem of time and mortality. Procreation in Sonnet 12 is merely physical reproduction of the youth, not a perpetuation of his essence. It's akin to breeding. Remember that word in the last line, save breed to brave him. So breeding is what animals do, right? Dogs breed. Is this a way to preserve his human essence? So I think in the later sonnets of the procreation sequence, poetry itself will be seen as the way to enable the youth to transcend time. And in this assertion, Shakespeare's building on a tradition from Ovid to Edmund Spenser. And this power of poetry is alluded to in sonnets 15, 16, and 17. Then it's gloriously affirmed in one of the most powerful sonnets ever, Sonnet 18, which ends with the following two lines. So long as men can breathe and eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. So I hope you've enjoyed that close reading of Shakespeare's sonnet number 12. As I said, leave a comment if you have other points to raise about this poem, or you have other works that we should do a close analysis of. Thank you very much.